All right, so macros are like little automated tasks that you can record and tell the computer to do over and over and over again. So whenever you have sort of some kind of repetitive task which you've got to do over and over and over again, you could save time with a macro. And macros are actually, the way they get created is with some programming. And so when you have a macro saved in a worksheet, and here you can see a worksheet saving time with macros, and it's a Microsoft Excel worksheet. Here you can see another worksheet workbook named exactly the same way, but this is a Microsoft Excel macro enabled worksheet. So when you have a macro enabled worksheet, I'm going to open one up right here. It says, hey, security warning, macros have been disabled. Do you want to enable this content? And the reason it asks you this is because potentially macros could have viruses in them if they weren't created by you or somebody you know. So if somebody sent you a spreadsheet and they had macros in it, they could potentially have viruses. So the reason for that is if we were to go in and look at our macros, and maybe I'm getting the cart in front of the horse here, like view my macros and then edit a macro. See, it takes me into VB programming. So that's all kind of overwhelming and intimidating, but there is a great purpose for macros, and let me show you what that is. So the best way to understand what a macro is to actually see it in action. So for instance, let's say I needed to repetitively kind of highlight certain cells red like that. Well, I could go in, I could select each cell, and I could say, okay, well, let's make that cell red, and then we'll make the font white. And there we go. Oh, I want it bold too. And I also want to do that again right here. I'll make it red, white, bold. Oh, and this one too. Red, white. Right, it gets a little repetitive, that repetitive task. Alternatively, I can record a macro. So I could come up here, I could go to View, Macros, Record a Macro. And when I come here to choose Record a Macro, there's something here called Use Relative References. And relative references just basically means that, if I'm going to be doing something that goes in addition, goes between cells, isn't just acting upon one cell, then relative to where I start out, I want it to move kind of like relative formulas. Like here, I'm going to start out here, then move down two, and then move over, down one, and then over two, right? So that would be relative references. I'm going to show you that example in a second. First example here, I'm just going to hit record macro. And now it's going to ask me what I want to call this macro. I'm going to call it macro example. And then I could assign a shortcut key to it. So I just click in that little box and I choose whatever key I want. So I want to try to choose a key where there isn't already a shortcut assigned to it that I use. And this will save your macro. It'll become a new shortcut key and it will overwrite. So if I was to use Control C here, it's going to overwrite copy, and copy will no longer work in this workbook. Alternatively, I could save it to the personal macro workbook, which will make it available in all of the workbooks that I use on this computer. So if I don't want to just save it to the one workbook that I'm working on, if I find myself doing the same task in many different workbooks, I could save it here, and then any workbook I use on this one computer will have that macro available. So I'm going to save it to this workbook, and I'm going to change it from Control C to, I don't know, what's something I never use, maybe Control Y, or Control Shift Y. There we go. We'll go with Control Shift Y. And this is just going to be to format cell fill red and text white and bold. There we go. Hit OK. So now my macro is recording, and the only way I can tell that is if I look down here, I see this little white box, which allows me to stop my macro. So there's my active cell, and I'm going to go to the home ribbon. All my actions are being recorded now, and I'm going to choose that color, and bold. And now I'm going to hit stop. And now when I press on my keyboard, Control Shift Y, I get that entry there. Control Shift Y, Control Shift Y, Control Shift Y, Control Shift Y. So it saves me the time of having to click up here. I could also assign that macro to a little icon if I wanted to, right there. Assigned it to an icon. So to do that, I come up here to the quick access toolbar and I choose more commands from that list. And in more commands, I can come up here and choose commands from macros. And then I see all my macros up here. So I'm going to choose my sample macro and I'm going to add it to my quick access toolbar right there. So I'm going to add that over. And then I'm going to modify it. And I could come in here and I could choose an icon for it. So I don't know, I'll just choose that shield and hit OK and OK. And now that shield shows up here. And anytime I click that shield, it allows me to change that text. I could also put this down below so it's a little bit closer so I don't have to go quite so far to click it. So that's the first macro. I could do macros for like, by the way, there are no undos in macros, right? So let me show you. I do that, no undo arrow. I'm going to move this back up just because we're used to it being up there. No undo arrow. Control Z also does not undo anything. So no undos in macros. All right, so here I want to kind of use relative references for a macro. So let me show you how this one works. Let's say I have all these rows I want to delete.